Welcome to R&R Showtime with Robert.
And Ryan.
And today is a very special episode, at least for me, I think. Today, Ryan and I are going to be talking about Lord of the Rings, specifically the first movie, Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah, I watched it all the way through for the first time. It's a couple weeks ago now, but I had planned to record this a little sooner, but it is what it is. I've seen the Fellowship of the Ring now.
Yes, after not having seen it for however many years this guy's been alive.
I mean, technically, I saw like almost half of it as a kid, but I didn't really know what was going on.
Yeah.
And I actually have commentary about having watched it as a kid.
Yeah. So basically might as well have not watched it it's like when you watch something as a kid and even if you watched it and you're like 8, you go back and you're just like, well, I might as well just not watch that movie as much as I watched it. Like, I think I watched The Shining as a kid, but I might as well have not watched it as far as I'm concerned. Like, I'd never seen that movie.
Yeah, like unless it's one of those movies that you watched like religiously as a kid, like if you watched it one time, I watched Shrek all the time as a kid. I remember Shrek. I watched Hocus Pocus all the time as a kid, but I kept watching that, I guess. Not as equal a thing, but yeah. If it's something you just saw once, you effectively didn't watch it.
Yeah. So, but me, I've seen the movie a dozen times, quote it all the time, love the movies, basically some of my favorite movies. And yeah, so now this is almost like a special moment where I can talk about these movies with my brother after many years of literally trying to persuade him to watch it. He finally did it. So
yeah, and I think watching The Fellowship of the Ring really crystallized a subconscious reason that I did not want to watch these movies, but I want to sort of get into that later as we talk about the plot of the movie, because there's a specific scene in the movie where I watched it and I thought, oh, this is why I didn't want to watch this movie, like subconsciously.
Interesting. Well, we're going to basically go in our more or less, normal format that we've, followed for a while here. But we might, sort of shift it up a little bit as we go, but it's just our best way to guide this. So we're going to start with Ryan. What was your first impression of the Fellowship of the Ring?
I'm finally watching my first impression when I was a kid, I was like, this is boring. I want to watch Jimmy Neutron. Watching it as an adult, it's really good. I watched the extended editions and I'll admit they're long, but like I was interested. I enjoyed it. I watching these movies made me realize how little I knew of the plot of these movies. Like when I watched Star Wars, like I knew the basic plots of the movie. And even more than that, I knew like casual details about scenes in the movie. With Lord of the Rings, like I knew the overarching idea of the 3 movies, but there's a lot of stuff that I just did not know and did not remember from watching it as a kid. Like a good example is I forgot that the person that they meet at that inn was Aragorn. For some reason, I thought that they met Boromir and Aragorn and not just Aragorn. And I didn't remember him not being named Aragorn.
Yeah.
Which is just basic level stuff to not know.
Basic. How do you not know this? Wow. Loser.
And like, I feel like I was still watching. No. Okay. So I did not get very far into this movie when I watched it as a kid. So that's another reason why I don't have a lot of knowledge of what happens, particularly in the Fellowship.
Yeah. Well, pretty great.
Yeah.
Right.
So what? Yeah, it's a good movie. Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll just get right into it, and I'm going to review the plot. As I mean, I would hope most people have, honestly, I can't even expect that. It's not like this is a pretty big movie. It's been around for a long time. A lot of people have seen it, but it's not actually necessarily that well watched of a movie or anything.
It's a bit of a commitment, is what it is.
If you don't do the extended edition, you can get away with it in just under 3 hours. So which is not much more than, I mean, going to watch an Endgame or, we just watched Army of the Dead that just came out. It was 2 hours and 40 minutes. And that movie definitely needed 40 minutes cut out of it.
I haven't seen it yet, so could be another podcast.
Could be another podcast, yeah.
But yeah, so you're going to probably have to go in broad strokes to get through this plot. Like, yeah. But if there's any parts of the movie that stand out to you as favorite parts of the movie, you bring that up. But as you're telling this, I'm just going to share my thoughts if I have them.
Yeah. Okay. So movie starts with really a sort of a historical, monologue that gives us a little bit of background on, the events of something about to do with the ring, basically. And, a big, great war a long time ago, and how eventually this ring passed into mystery and, legend. And we start with, a hobbit who meets a traveling wizard, Frodo and Gandalf. They come together and they make their way to see Bilbo Baggins. Gandalf is coming into Hobbiton, the town of hobbits, to see his old friend Bilbo, whose birthday it is, his 111th birthday. And they meet and, are merry. And Bilbo sort of tells Gandalf that he has a plan, that he's going to leave soon. That he's grown a little bit tired of being in the Shire and he wants to travel again and see things, and references old adventures that, they had before. And so that evening they have a huge celebration for Bilbo's birthday, and, lots of shenanigans and interesting things happen. But we really get to the, major part of the birthday where Bilbo comes to make a speech. And as Bilbo makes a speech, he says something kind of funny and everybody's a little confused. And he ends up doing something pretty fantastic and amazing, is that he disappears in the middle of his speech.
Using this ring he has.
Yes, using a ring that he possesses. He secrets himself away to his house, where Gandalf finds him, and Bilbo, after a brief interaction, Bilbo leaves the ring and all of his home, which is one of the nicest and most expensive large homes in the town of Hobbits. Bag End. He leaves everything to Frodo, and he goes off on his journey. This interaction was, strange and kind of sinister and dark, and actually, makes Gandalf a little bit curious about what happened. So when Frodo arrives, he tells him, keep everything's yours. Take this, and he hands him the ring in an envelope and tells him, keep this secret and keep it safe.
Yeah, keep it secret, keep it safe.
Yeah, and Gandalf goes away for what nobody knows in the movie. They do not really give you a good indication of how long it is, but it's and correct me if I'm wrong, I always actually get this a little bit confused. It's like 11 or 13 years. Yeah, you don't know that when you watch the movie, right? It's many years.
In the movie, I don't think that's how long it is.
Yeah, in the movie, whether they're, I don't know if they're reinterpreting it like it's a lesser amount of time, but it is a very long amount of time.
Yeah.
Like many years.
Takes time for wizards to be doing stuff, though.
Yeah, well, what people don't sometimes understand is that Gandalf literally had to travel relatively far away, and then he had to go through just paper records.
Yeah.
For it's not like this stuff was like organized, with the Dewey Decimal System or anything. He's literally just looking for, mention of something, obscure and strange. So, but yeah. So what do you think about this sort of first, this first little, introduction?
This is the part of the movie that I'm probably was the most familiar with. I sort of knew who Gandalf was, who Frodo was at this point, who Bilbo is. So it wasn't a lot of new experience for me watching this part of the movie, but I did not remember how the ring, why Bilbo left, why he left the ring. I did not know that Gandalf didn't already know what the ring was when he saw it. honestly, just this sort of idea that this ring was lost to time, essentially, and then Bilbo basically just sort of kept it for a while, was not something that I was necessarily aware of. So in the book, he spends 11 to 13 years researching the ring, but in the movie, I feel like the impetus to move the ring is triggered by... So the ring wraiths are made aware of the ring's presence because of Gollum. So we're just gonna treat it as the movie. So
again, the movie is different. They do a few different things for the purposes of shortening or just leaving things out that didn't need to be necessarily need to be there. Things that would have just been made the movie longer for no reason and don't necessarily add too much to the actual plot.
Yeah.
And so that's fine. You know, like I like to sometimes reference like this is what actually happened in the book compared to the movie. But yeah, things are left out purposefully.
But yeah, so at this point in the movie, it's nothing really new to me. So we can keep going.
Yeah, they sort of put it as there's an impetus to leave and move the ring because now someone's coming after it, and
the ring wraiths.
Yeah, and so after some time in the movies, like whether they want to interpret it as lesser or more, that's not necessarily important to the actual plot. But after some time, Gandalf does return, comes to the Shire, very perturbed, and he comes to Frodo and says, like, do you still have that ring and is it safe? And he compels him to leave on sort of a quest. And he says, you need to take this ring and you need to go to the House of the Elves, Rivendell. You need to take it somewhere safe. On the way, you need to go to a town called Bree, and I will meet you there. But for now, he has to go and he needs to seek the counsel of one of the highest of his order, Saruman the White. So Frodo, accompanied by his gardener, Samwise Gamgee, both embark on a journey to get to first to Bree and then onward to Rivendell. And
while they're going out, they are trailed by their two friends, Peregrine Took and I don't remember Mary's full name.
Mary Doc Brandybuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, during this journey, they encounter their friends and continue on with them. And while they are on their journey, they are pursued by the ring wraiths, these cloaked black figures, black riders, you might say. And they eventually do make it to Bree relatively safely. And while they're there, they take some rest at an inn. And during an encounter in the inn, Frodo slips and the ring falls coincidentally onto his finger, and it is revealed that it turns him invisible.
Yeah.
To many people that see it, apparently.
But this also triggers the senses of the ring wraiths.
Yes, this perks them up because they can sense it. They can see him when he enters this shadowy realm that Frodo appears to be in.
And it also piques the interest of one Strider.
Yes, a man that is in the bar there.
A ranger,
a friend of Gandalf, but unbeknownst to the hobbits, sees Frodo come, reappear and takes him up stairs and references, that thing that you have there is mighty and powerful, and you should be more careful. The other hobbits burst in to protect their friend, and Strider makes it clear, I'm a friend. You can trust me. I know Gandalf. And so far, the hobbits expected to have met Gandalf there, and it's strange that he isn't there. Wizards are never late, nor are they early. They always arrive precisely when they mean to. Is literally one of the first things we get from him in the movie. And the very next time we expect him to be somewhere, he's just not there at all. So apparently he didn't, that was not precisely when he meant to arrive.
But we as the audience know is because he's getting, kind of messed up by Saruman, who turns out to be in league with Lord Sauron.
Lord Sauron, the evil, the dark one, who the One Ring is tied to. Yeah, if I didn't say that technically, I mean, I just skipped over the historical part, but yeah, the One Ring is tied to this Dark Lord,
And
that will destroy everything.
the ring wraiths are servants of Sauron, trying to return the Ring of Power to
Yeah.
its rightful seat.
So Strider comes in league with the hobbits, and they continue their journey on. As they're going, some fun little moments happen. Some pretty not picturesque, pretty memorable moments. Nobody forgets second breakfast.
Yeah. It's a lot of Merry and Pippin adjusting to they're not in the Shire, and it's not going to be all fun and games. And they don't know quite just yet how not fun it's going to be. None of these hobbits do. It's kind of in thinking back to the first movie, having watched the other movies, they have no idea what they're in for.
Yep. So they continue to travel, and eventually they get to this sort of landmark of the area, which is referred to as Weathertop. They go and they make camp, and Strider goes out to sort of patrol and scout the area and see if there might be anything going on. And in the middle of the night, the other hobbits, not including Frodo, start campfire and cooking. Frodo wakes up and tries to dash the fire quickly, but it's too late. The ringwraiths have noticed their fire on Weathertop and are now pursuing them. And they follow them up to the top of Weathertop and and they sort of, the hobbits try to defend themselves, but they are just cast aside. They're far not nearly powerful enough to stand against the ringwraiths. And one of the ringwraiths comes to take the ring from Frodo, and Frodo resists him, and he stabs him with a...
Frodo puts the ring on in this scene.
Yes, he puts it on, to hide, to flee from them. But there it is revealed, the true form of them, that they are like these ghastly white men with, crowns. And yes, when one of them reaches out, he resists, and it stabs him with a black blade. And at this time, though, Strider comes to save them and battles off the ringwraiths that are there, of which there are only 5, I believe. 5 out of 9. Or 4 out of 9.
I think 4.
Yeah, 4 out of 9. Battles them off and is able to, prevent them from doing any more harm or from taking the ring. And then they have they have to start moving.
I want to make a note of this scene.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I talked about earlier, that there was a scene in the movie that sort of stayed with me and made me not want to watch this movie again. Something that I don't think people talk about enough when it comes to The Lord of the Rings, and maybe this doesn't resonate with you because you didn't have this experience as a kid. This movie terrified me. This movie genuinely scared me. I'm pretty sure, I didn't have nightmares as a kid, but there were nights where I just thought about this scene and the ring wraiths and stuff, and it was just sort of some of the scariest stuff to me as a kid. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that stayed with me in my subconscious, because as I was watching the movie, I just sort of felt like a little bit of me as a kid, watching those scenes came in and was just like, oh God, I remember the feeling I had watching this as a kid.
Wow, that's interesting. I kind of thought that might be what you were getting at when you referenced it earlier. And I will say, they do a pretty amazing job in this movie of really creating terror and dread that you would feel for these ringwraiths. I mean, the times that you encounter them, it's all a very menacing and frightening experience. And yeah, they make each scene more and more as it builds on it. Just something they become something to be feared. At least until Aragorn beats down 4 of them, one on 4, and you're like, oh, okay, well he's clearly a huge badass or something.
But and it's not even just the ring wraiths. The totality of this movie, at this point in the movie, I'm just I don't see this movie getting any less scary to me. And I just sort of hid my eyes until I woke up and it was all bright and shiny and they were in Rivendell. And then I wanted to leave still.
Well, yeah. So but yeah, so they continue on. They try to keep moving, but Frodo, having been wounded by this blade that is special. It's essentially a cursed, or you could say a poisoned blade that now is infecting him with something that will turn him into a ring wraith if it goes on for too long. And they do their best to move onward, but they don't make too much progress, and the ring wraiths are still following them until at one point in their journey, they are joined by Arwen, basically the daughter of the leader of Rivendell, an elf, who comes and takes Frodo away with her on a horse, and speeds him quickly to Rivendell. And on her journey is pursued by all of the ring wraiths, all 9 of them that encounter her, and she is only barely able to keep stay ahead of them, and eventually passes the river into the territory of Rivendell. And there, when the ring wraiths come against her and they come to charge against her, she essentially summons some of the magic that is available to her, and a great flood comes down the river in the form of like trampling horses and destroys all the ring wraiths, at least temporarily, because the ring wraiths cannot be destroyed, for they are undead.
Is that what happened?
Yes.
I thought they just got stopped by the river.
Nope. They come to attack her. They all are going to take blades, and they call out to her and say, give us the halfling she-elf. And she literally calls upon magic to.
Are you certain that this is not the book?
Nope, this isn't the movie.
Okay. That's weird. I don't remember that happening, but yeah.
Yeah, because in the book, that's not even actually Arwen that comes to save Frodo. It's a totally different elf.
Okay. Well, Arwen's cool.
Yeah, she's all right. Actually, arguably not as cool as the person in the book that saves him, but
he arrives in Rivendell and he's saved. Frodo's saved.
Yep, he is saved.
This is the first time that Frodo almost dies, but then doesn't. It happens a lot.
Yep.
A lot. Yep. It's kind of his defining character trait, is almost dying.
Perseverance, you mean?
Yeah.
It's a good trait. Almost dying and not is a I would if I had to pick any trait, that'd be a pretty decent one to have.
I'm just making fun. Yeah,
I know.
We've arrived in Rivendell.
Yep, we've arrived in Rivendell, where when Frodo awakens after being I mean, he is on essentially death's door. Like, he's passing away into where he might be transforming into the ring wraith soon enough, but he gets to Rivendell in time, and through the magic and healing of Elrond, the leader of Rivendell, he is saved, and he awakens to see Gandalf, who has joined them there in Rivendell. And we sort of learn from a flashback. I mean, it's not a flashback. This is happening in time with this journey, that Gandalf, after being, we didn't really go over what happened. He goes to see Saruman. Saruman has turned over and is allying with Sauron, and he imprisons Gandalf on the top of his massive, ginormous tower, Orthanc. And during this time, he is trying to convince Gandalf to turn to his side, like, you will join me or you will die. And he thinks that he can turn Gandalf over, but at one point Gandalf, uses an opportunity and is able to summon help from one of the giant eagles who he is allied with, and he escapes this way and makes his way to Rivendell. Which, hey, thing in the books that was a little different. When he escapes, he goes to meet them at Bree, is just too late, encounters the ring wraiths, and fights all 9 of them at Weathertop before they have arrived at Weathertop, draws off most of them, and then the ones that are left are the ones that Aragorn battles, which is why Aragorn was able to fight them, because they were weakened after battling Gandalf.
Interesting note.
Yeah.
So, but Gandalf's there, Aragorn's there, the 4 hobbits are there, and then they also arriving are Legolas, along with the other the woodland elves.
Yeah. So essentially, now that the ring has arrived in Rivendell, it is such an important matter that Gandalf and Elrond say that this is so important. We need to speak with like all the peoples of this land. Like this, like we know that this is what it is, and because of that, like this pertains to all persons. So they summon representatives from all the different races, from the dwarves, from the elves, and from men.
Boromir of Gondor.
Yeah, Gimli of the dwarves of Erebor.
Gimli the only dwarf.
Yeah,
And
he's not actually the only dwarf. There's a company of them, but the only ones that are really relevant here.
in the movie, like the only dwarf that speaks or is prominently shown on screen at all throughout these 3 movies. It's why he did the Hobbits, because he wanted to have a bunch of dwarves.
Yeah, I mean, arguably, yeah, dwarves don't have a huge role even in the Lord of the Rings books. They're just, they're doing things that there's stuff that the dwarves are doing elsewhere, but
they keep to themselves.
Yeah. So, but there is now a assembly of all the different peoples and representatives that could be summoned here, and they have a council to essentially decide what the fate of the ring should be, what they should do with it. Now that they have this thing, this terrible but powerful, essentially, weapon that they, that is the key to Sauron's power. And they already know, it's sort of reported in this thing that Sauron is marshaling forces and orcs are moving and a greater danger is coming. And through the discussions, ideas are posed, to take it and use it as a weapon. Which Gandalf makes clear that, using this as a weapon, it would wield greater and worse power through you, that it would corrupt and turn you over, or you would, fail. This ring is a evil weapon inherently, and any person that uses it will be turned. And he makes it clear that it cannot be used as a weapon. And basically the council eventually sort of, they have a decision that they say it must be destroyed. And the only way to destroy it is to take it all the way to Mordor, into Mount Doom, and cast it into
the fires from which it was
created.
Yeah.
And there becomes a big argument over who's going to do it, because, the dwarves say, like, I'm not going to let an elf do it. And the men say, I'm the strongest. And they begin to fight over it. And, we know that there's a presence almost. Frodo is kind of feeling it and sensing that the presence of the ring is actually sowing discord amongst, the people there. Its evil is literally seeping into them. And Frodo lets out a cry that he'll do it across all the men.
And
men and elves and dwarves.
And you see this reaction from, I mean, you get a reaction from a lot of them. Like, some are just like astonished. They're just like, oh, wow, that's pretty impressive of this hobbit. But we see like Gandalf and Aragorn have an almost sadness to know that, or when Frodo volunteered, he was right. He's the one that has to do it.
Yeah.
Particularly Gandalf. He has this sort of resigned that this is the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's something unfortunate in the sense that, I mean, this hobbit is essentially uncorrupted. I mean, hobbits have been sheltered and they are a peaceful folk. And the idea that Frodo's already experienced so much, somewhat evil and terrible things already. But now to the idea that he's going to go into Mordor, an evil land where there's, nothing good, he's basically, Gandalf knows that he has a lot facing him now. And this decision is, humble and heroic, but, like the pain that he foresees him going to experience is a lot. But
a fellowship is created to accompany Frodo on his mission.
Yes.
Made up of, the elf Legolas, the dwarf Gimli, the man Boromir, the man Aragorn, and the other hobbits, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, and the wizard Gandalf.
Mm-hmm. And the fellowship is formed. Then end of disc 1. And so there are a couple other things that are occurring here. I mean, there's an interaction between Boromir and Aragorn where they are, they see the shards of Narsil, which is essentially the broken blade of, and that's okay. At some point, I don't know if we made this the distinction that Strider is a nickname for Aragorn.
Yeah.
And Aragorn, during the Council of Elrond, is made clear that Aragorn is actually the heir to the throne of Gondor, which Boromir is he is the son of the steward and a captain of the guard. So he's, you could probably say he's almost like a prince, but not, they're technically not a royal blood. They are just of a bloodline that is meant to protect the throne and Gondor. So, but he's like, probably the second most important person, arguably in Gondor. But Aragorn is essentially heir to that throne. He's supposed to be the king there. He just has lived a life of, isolation and has not taken that up for whatever his own reasons, out of not feeling ready to or whatever. It's not necessarily gone over in the movie per se. It's even the books, they don't get into why he hasn't done it, taken it up yet.
I mean, he's grown up with elves most of his life, so so it's not really explored.
Yeah, there's an interaction between Boromir and Aragorn over that blade, and him, that sort of the feelings between that. There's an interaction with Frodo and Bilbo. So Bilbo on his journey basically made his way. Again, we reference, book wise, very long time between Gandalf coming back. Bilbo goes on multiple adventures, and he goes off to see the dwarves of Erebor and to visit Lake Town. He basically goes back to all these places he visited before, and then he ends up in Rivendell. So he's there when Frodo arrives, and here we see him bequeath Frodo with a few of his items from his journey, and a mithril shirt, which is basically made of a ultra light and super hard rare metal. And he gives him a magic sword that he used previously, and some advice. And he has an interesting interaction where we see some of this corruption from the ring, something that happened to Bilbo over time. This craven and need, that seeped into Bilbo over many years. Bilbo, who is a kind and generous and all the things you could, all the good things you could say about a hobbit. And, he just has this moment of strange weakness and almost, evil, where he, reaches out and wants the ring. And we see it acts as an interesting reflection of like something, he lived in essentially relative like comfort and safety, but over time the ring still did that to him. And, we see that, again, this is something that Frodo might experience in his.
You have to
journey.
take him as the character that he was in the Hobbit books to recognize who Bilbo was, to have it corrupt him so severely.
Yeah. And so we have that interaction there. And I'm trying to remember if there's anything else we're missing. There's also an interaction between Aragorn and Arwen, where we basically see like they are, like they are in love, but there's an issue. I mean, he is a man, and he has a different fate. He's mortal. It's, issues and blah, blah, blah. And that Elrond, the father of Arwen, does not necessarily agree with her staying behind and, loving a man who will die.
Yeah. And so there's this thing where the elves of Rivendell are leaving to go to basically get out of Middle Earth. And he wants to send Arwen along with that journey, but she is making it pretty clear that she does not want to leave. But we get more of the interplay in the scene. But in this movie, we see that she gives Aragorn this what appears to be a pendant on a necklace that she has. And do you want to clarify, because it's not articulated in the films exactly what that is, so do you want to clarify?
I mean, again, I'm not like a super Lord of the Rings expert. I've read the books and things, but like sometimes the books are so thick sometimes, like I forget all the stuff in them. But I believe it is an amulet that sort of, it has like again, also to say, when I say it has some magic in it, that magic isn't like super, like it's, Tolkien didn't write like a hard magic system. He wasn't like, this is how magic works, right?
Yeah.
Things are just kind of magical in the books. And this amulet is kind of magical. It's tied to her like life force kind of, or something. Again, if somebody listening to this knows better than I do, please clarify more. But
my impression was that it was like almost like her soul or her heart that she was giving to him, her immortality in a way.
Yeah, I don't know if it's quite exactly that. It's not her giving her immortality, but it is something like, it is kind of like a protective sort of thing, and it's just a very rare, like super nice amulet. It's representative,
but in a show of her true love and devotion, gives it to Aragorn as he's getting ready to go on this quest.
Yeah. So, I mean, up to this point, is there any general thoughts about like the first half of the movie or anything new?
The first half of the movie, again, probably the part of all of these movies that I had the best idea of what was happening, what was going on. my impression of these characters, I guess. Let's think of it that way. Frodo, cool. Sam, cool. At this point, Sam doesn't have a really lot going on. He's just kind of there. Merry and Pippin, they're funny, like those guys. Legolas and Gimli, don't get a ton of them. They're just sort of regulated to the side. It's funny because as a kid, we really, your love of Lord of the Rings definitely permeated outside of watching the movies, like whether it was just talking about Lord of the Rings characters or playing video games. Honestly, I got a lot of memories of playing Lord of the Rings video games, watching these movies. Like, oh, I've never seen this before, but I remember either playing this part of the video game or seeing this when you played the video game. So in my mind, Legolas and Gimli were much more important characters. And at this point, they've only barely been there, but they're not, they don't really have pronounced arcs throughout these stories, but they do provide good character, interesting moments. Particularly Gimli. Gimli's great.
Yeah, I mean
I don't think I, as a child, understood that Gimli was a comic relief.
I mean, yeah, he certainly gives a lot of cool comic relief and everything. I mean, he's enjoyable. I mean, I love all these characters, but I like Gimli for being kind of a funny, breath of fresh air, while not being like he's not quite a joke. He's not like,
he's a dwarf. He is authentically the dwarfiest dwarf you ever did see.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not. It's funny that you go watch The Hobbit and you're like, all right, dwarves, right? Like they can still be honorable and like cool and stuff, but also kind of like, like silly. But yeah.
And then I think Boromir is really the character that I knew the least about going in these movies. I just know that he's played by Sean Bean and that he dies in the Fellowship.
Yeah, which really just started a long string of him playing characters that die.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, actually, I think it started earlier than that because
Probably.
he was the 00 and the Bond film that also died.
Poor scene Bond.
Yeah. Yeah. He just doesn't get to be a character that, gets to live.
I mean, he doesn't die in National Treasure, but he doesn't have a happily ever after either.
Yeah. Well.
Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, the Fellowship sets out from Rivendell. They begin a journey along paths to go to Mordor, and they are going to go on what they believe is the best, quickest, and safest route, making for the gap to Rohan.
If I had to guess what was added in the extended edition, I would guess maybe going to the mountain with like all the snow, only for them to just turn around and have that be sort of like just be there. Like it felt like padding, like watching them trudge through the snow, only for them to be like, all right, let's go some other way.
Interestingly, no. It's actually an important thing in the book and definitely in the main movie.
It was in the theatrical cut?
Yeah.
At the end of this, I want to ask what was added. But so, yeah,
you can probably tell a lot of the things as I guess it's hard because you never watch the theatrical.
I don't know what is seen as not needed, but if you have a good idea of knowing what they are, we can discuss that at the end. If you don't really know, then it's something I can maybe look up later.
Yeah, I mean, I know some of the things I can reference, but up to this point, I can't. Well, yeah, we'll talk about it more later. So they're traveling along, and while they're traveling, they spot and hide from this massive like bird-like creatures, essentially, or basically birds as far as we know. They call them something like a crabline from Dunlin or something. Again, I don't remember exactly even what that is, but these birds fly overhead, and they identify that these birds are not normal, that they're spies for Saruman. And so this pass that they were going to take, the quickest, safest, fastest way to go to get to where they're going, is guarded. And if they are seen, then they'll probably be attacked. So they now have a choice that's presented to them. They can either go over the mountain, and by traveling over the mountain, get to the other side, or it's suggested that they go through the mines of Moria, which would be going under the mountain.
Which at the suggestion of this, we see Gimli say, "Oh yes, let's go through the dwarven territory. I'll see my dwarven brethren. It'll be a good time." But we see Gandalf just clearly like very troubled about the idea of going this way, but he leaves the choice up to Frodo of where to go.
Yeah. So, but at first they do just go over the mountain because
they do. They attempt that.
They attempt it, but at some point they are basically beaten back by what they believe to be, like Saruman is casting spells and he's, basically making it very difficult to travel, dangerous, like a whole storm brews up.
Yeah.
And at some point they have to make a decision whether they try to keep going on, even though it's so dangerous, or they go back. And Frodo decides, let's go back. Let's go through the mines. They make their way down. They get to the gates of Moria, and after some time, they figure out the passphrase to get inside, and they begin to enter. When they realize that something is wrong. Like these mines, whatever dwarves were here are dead, and something killed. Like it is not good, and they they begin to try and leave as if they're going to make for the pass again, and say they can't go this way. When some sort of beast primordial beast with tentacles comes out of the water just outside the gate, and it begins to attack them, and they are pressed inside the gates, and the gates are torn asunder, and they are trapped within. So they must only go forward. So interesting things about these parts, from the books. Gandalf actually was the one that wanted to go through the mines, and Aragorn did not.
Interesting.
And I believe it's that like they both traveled through the mines at some point, but Gandalf less recently, and Aragorn, and when they traveled through, Aragorn was less sure of what was it, and he was more, it was more dangerous to him. But when Gandalf passed through, he said it was all quiet, and that Gimli. They did not know. Gimli says in the movies that he's like, "Oh, we'll be treated. It'll be so great." But in the books, Gimli and his company have not heard from the dwarves that went to Erebor in many months. So they actually, in some ways, he wants to find out what's going on there. He does not know what's happened. They haven't had any messages for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's casually implied that like he hasn't seen him in a while, but he's just sort of assumes the best.
Yeah, like I think there's even a reference in the book where somebody asks, they're like, "Oh, well, what do you know? What's happened to what's going on with Balin and Moria?" And they say, "Well, we don't know what's going on. In fact, we'd like to go there and find out." So, nonetheless, they enter the mines of Moria, and it's a dark place underground, and we have them traveling for some time, and once they get to a certain place, once they've gone deeper in this massive, huge hall underground is revealed, and they keep moving, and eventually they get a little bit of light that's somehow penetrating down deep here, and when they enter that place, they see a tomb where Balin, Gimli's cousin, is laid to rest, and they have a record there of what happened before. And while Gandalf reads this record of what had happened in the last moments of Moria, or the dwarves that were here, Pippin knocks a skeleton in a bucket down a well, and just causes a raucous amount of noise.
Yeah,
and this noise awakens the goblins that were sleeping deep down in Moria, and the company knows that they are coming for them, and then they engage in this pretty. I mean, to me, one of the coolest battles.
I would agree. It's definitely a good tense scene.
Yeah, just a lot going on. Just, crazy. They're surrounded. They start flooding in. We start really getting to see the whole fellowship just going to work, just fighting these things. And eventually a cave troll breaks in and starts just whipping on them. At one point, the cave troll, Aragorn tries to protect Frodo from the cave troll, but the cave troll pierces Frodo with a long, massive pike, and
Almost Dead Frodo #2.
Yeah, almost did Frodo #2. And the party, they sort of slay all the goblins that are immediately threatening them and kill the troll, and they think that Frodo is dead, but he is not. He is saved by the mithril armor, and they're all surprised to see it, which I think one to comment on. I think there's a point where they're talking about there's an extended scene where they talk about how Bilbo's old mithril thing, and that it was worth more than the whole Shire, as they not realizing that Frodo's wearing it.
Yeah.
So that is an extra scene, not in the movie, but I always thought it was interesting. But they now have to leave. They have to move quickly, and they start to move, and they run. And at a certain point, as they're trying to escape and make it to this doorway that would descend them deeper, they are surrounded. And it looks like they're surrounded by what looks like just thousands and thousands of goblins. Like they would surely just get destroyed here. But something makes the goblins run away. Something emitting fire, bigger, huge. It's booming as its steps fall, and the goblins like run off. They run away, and the party, Gandalf is like, run, like we need to go, like
fly.
Yeah, he knows that he knows what this is himself. It's something that's dwelled deep in Moria and stayed asleep for long, but they have woken it now, and so they begin heading down these broken stairs deeper into Moria to escape. And when it looks like they are finally getting to where they can exit, this last lone bridge that will get them out of there, this creature, a Balrog,
Balrog of Moria,
it finally catches them, and Gandalf turns to face it, and using his magic, kind of repels it for a moment, and then, sunders the bridge so that the Balrog will fall deep into this chasm below.
You shall not pass.
Yep, you shall not pass.
Again, this is another scene that I remembered seeing. Like I had seen this scene before. However, I may have seen it at the beginning of the Two Towers, is the one thing I'll give there. That may have been where I saw this scene as a kid.
Yeah. But yeah, as it's falling, it uses a whip in its hands to grab hold of Gandalf's feet, and he falls to the edge, and the rest of the party sees Gandalf, and again, another one of those iconic phrases, "Fly, you fools," and he lets go, and Gandalf plummets down with the Balrog.
And Frodo, and everybody's devastated, but Frodo in particular, Gandalf.
Yeah, so it's a hard moment for everybody. Gandalf was like in some sense really their the wisdom, the leader in a lot of ways, and it's a big loss for them.
This is truly a scene where I wish I could have known what it was like to watch this without the knowledge of him coming back. Like, I wish there was a universe where I, as an adult, could have watched The Lord of the Rings without spoilers.
Yeah, I'm glad that as a kid, like I had not read the books before I watched the first movie. Like the first movie was my introduction into, the Lord of the Rings, and so it was essentially a surprise to me. And I did not read it. I did not read the books even after the second movie. It wasn't until I actually watched the third movie that I went back and actually read all the books for the first time.
As an 11-year-old.
Yeah. So, but we have the party. They're escaping. They're distraught. They take a moment, to weep for Gandalf, but they cannot rest. The goblins that are left are going to be pursuing them, and so they push on into the forest of Lothlorien, where
there's said to be a witch.
Yes, a witch. Superstition really about like that the elves that are here are bad or something. But eventually they encounter the elves of Lothlorien, who know of Frodo. They know that he is the ring bearer and that he's been coming this way. They know that they know who Aragorn is, and they basically take the rest of them into Lothlorien, and they bring them all before Galadriel, the sort of de facto leader of Lothlorien, and she her and I don't know, again, I have known his name before, but basically her man's who's also there. He's actually kind of a big deal too, but not to the story for the most part.
In the movie, Galadriel's the only one that matters.
Yeah, they ask about where Gandalf is, and they have to report that Gandalf has passed. He fell in Moria, which is just, it's bad for everybody. It's bad for the world, basically. Gandalf was a big deal. And there they basically take some rest, and there is a moment where we get to have Frodo go and he meets with Galadriel, and there
he offers her the ring.
Yes, she allows him to look into essentially a magic viewing mirror, and this mirror shows him a view of the present and the past and the future, and the things that he sees are the potential destruction of the Shire and how it looks now, and in the movie I can't remember all the images that he sees. I know that in the book he does essentially see some of the things in the future, like he sees himself later captured and other things, and also I believe in the books Sam is there as well. I can't remember in the movie if he's there.
No, it's just Frodo and Galadriel, as I recall.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, during this time, essentially he offers the ring to Galadriel, and Galadriel basically has like a reaction. She is a super powerful, essentially, being on the earth, and what's been made somewhat, it's not very clear in the movies, but it is made a point that powerful beings are the kind of people that might be able to control the ring, but it would basically turn them evil, and it would be just as bad as Sauron having the ring. Because
and she already has a ring of power. She has one of the elf rings.
Yeah, so she has this reaction, and she shows herself as being this great and terrible being. Yeah, and with that, it almost tells herself, she realizes there's no way I could take this ring. Even just the thought of taking it would have already transformed me. So
yeah, much in the same way Gandalf had refused it before. It's basically a more spelled out example of why even those that are good with power should not be given the ring.
Yeah, because it's the thing the ring will do is it'll usually heighten your inherent abilities, but it'll promise you what you most desire.
Yeah. Here's the thing. It's the metaphor of the ring in general. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But so after this, she says, she's like, no, you have to keep the ring, and you are the right one to take it. And yeah, the sort of interaction essentially ends, but it's just like a interesting thing that happens.
And then she gives gifts to everyone.
Yeah, and then when they are ready to leave, she gives them all different gifts, each one a different thing.
Merry and Pippin are given daggers for elves, but essentially swords for them.
Mm-hmm.
Sam is given some rope. Frodo is given this light.
Yes, he given the fuck. Why can't God? What a terrible Lord of the Rings. I can't remember what this is called right now. The light of the Even Star, I believe. No, that's not it. That's what Arwen wears. Basically, he gives them some bottled starlight.
Yeah,
is what it is. Which is like a powerful thing. It will emit a powerful light in the darkest of blah 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 and protect him, kind of.
And they're given this elven bread where if you eat just a little bit of it, it'll fill your stomach up.
Yeah.
And there's the little joke where Merry and Pippin are is like, how many have you had? I've had 4.
Yeah, exactly. So and what else do they think they get anything else? Oh, and one thing that seems like it's kind of a weird thing, but Gimli's gift, which you find, is just 3 pieces of Galadriel's hair. Which
I don't know if that comes up for any plot reason.
So in the books, from the significance of this is that I think in the Silmarillion, it is referenced that another elf, a powerful important elf like asked her for like some of her hair for some like reason or something, and she refused them at that time. So like for her to give him like a dwarf, like a lowly dwarf, her hair,
it's like the highest honor.
Yeah, it's like a highest honor, and Gimli realizes this. Like in the books, he realizes that it's like a huge deal. Like, and you see that like Gimli, he always is like, oh, elves, and like this general like regular racism between elves and dwarves. But like when he experiences Galadriel, he basically is like, you are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen on this planet, like bar none. You just are the most, like there's nothing more gorgeous than you. And yeah, then she is, she's a very what's the term I'm looking for?
Ethereal.
I don't know. Yeah,
majestic.
No, I'm just saying like she's definitely like moved by it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so they send them on their way in boats, and they travel down the river and are making good way. And eventually they come to a point where they make camp. And I want to make a point, actually, we've totally passed over here, is that Gandalf confirms, and it's, you sort of get this indication a few times that the Fellowship's been being followed since the Moria. In Moria, it's very clearly, shown that like something is following them there in Moria. And we get this is another extended scene, is that something is also following down the river. It is Gollum. And Gollum is the previous owner of the ring before Bilbo. Bilbo encountered Gollum deep under the Misty Mountains and in a riddle contest. And, if anybody's seen The Hobbit or read The Hobbit, in a riddle contest, he essentially outsmarted him and sort of won or tricked the ring from him.
Tricksters.
Yeah. And so Gollum has, been following them all this time because he is, ring bearers are tied to the ring, and Gollum had it for many hundreds of years. And it, if it somewhat corrupted Bilbo, it truly corrupted Gollum, and he
forgot his name.
Yeah, to the point where he forgot his name, and it. So he senses it, and he's following it. He's doing everything he can to get back to it because it's just the only thing that it's like there's this very interesting like metaphor or simile for like drugs. It's just like it's hooked into him so deep, like he can't be without it, and he'll do anything and follow it anywhere. But so we have him, he's following them down the river. But we have the party, and they stop for camp on one side, and they believe that relatively soon, if they continue down the river as they have been, they'll eventually get to Gondor. And there's a moment here where I think in the books they say it, where they're making a choice of what they're going to do next. Like, where do they go next up the river? And they sort of decide that they are going to go to Gondor, but they don't think that there's a little bit of like, they don't know if it's a good idea, because while they'll feel protected there, they're directly opposed from Mordor. So there's no way to sneak by. And obviously Boromir wants to go to Gondor, but it's not really the best decision. So there's a little bit of a split, and eventually they are like, they're just trying to decide where to go. And while they are making camp, everybody notices that Frodo is missing, and so is Boromir. And we have, Frodo basically he was just going off, and he's been considering something. Again, in the books, we know it a little better, but, in the movies, we'll know in a moment. But he goes off by himself, and Boromir encounters him, while collecting firewood. And we have this interaction where Boromir sort of makes he pleads to Frodo a little bit about, like, hey, you should, come on, we should go to Gondor, and you should give me the ring and stuff. And Frodo's, resisting him, and Boromir, something overtakes Boromir, and he kind of flies into almost a rage, and he tries to assault Frodo and take it from him. And Frodo puts the ring on and beats Boromir over the head and is able to escape from him. And when Boromir like slips and falls and he realizes what he's done, he
regrets his action, but he's lost Frodo at this point.
Yeah, and Frodo runs away, and Aragorn finds him, and Frodo's still on his guard. He doesn't really trust Aragorn, but Aragorn, he's like, hey, you can trust me. Like, I don't know what's happened, but you don't have anything to worry about from me. But this time they realize that something's coming, and Aragorn tells Frodo, he says, "Go, run," and I think Aragorn gets this feeling, and basically it's that Frodo's been considering going on his own, that he sees that Gandalf is lost. And at this point, he's accepted, like, this is my burden to bear, and I don't want anybody else to suffer for it. So I should just go alone.
Yeah.
And this is something he's been considering during this time, but now it's almost been proved, like Boromir was almost a threat to me. And he basically makes a decision that he's going to go on his own. And Aragorn recognizes that that's what he's going to do, and tells him to run. And a huge company of orcs shows up that have been tracking them for some time. And Aragorn basically bravely faces them down, and Legolas and Gimli come to help him. That the orcs are still pursuing Frodo, and they're running down the way. And we have the orcs sort of bearing down towards Frodo, and Merry and Pippin, see him, and they think, oh, Frodo has to get out of here. They don't understand at first, but they figure out, like, he's leaving, he's going. We have to make sure that he can escape. And so they run to draw off the orc forces. Frodo keeps running, and Merry and Pippin are running from the orcs, but Boromir comes in to fight the orcs off and protect them, and is just cleaving orcs left and right. When the leader of this orc band,
it's an Uruk-hai, right?
Yeah, Uruk-hai, which are essentially in a combination of from what is an Uruk-hai, right? What's the difference between orc and goblin? Well, from what I understand from some things I've read about Lord of the Rings before, orcs and goblins are actually interchangeable. There is no difference. It's just two different words for the same thing as far as this universe goes. But Uruk-hai are supposed to be like a hybrid of men and orcs, or men and goblins, you could say. So they are like they're a bigger, stronger, faster version,
smarter.
Yeah, but this leader of these Uruk-hai, it draws back this mighty bow, and it hits Boromir with an arrow, and another one, and another one. He just takes 3 arrows straight to the chest, and he falls. And the Uruk-hai take Merry and Pippin. And just before the leader is going to cut Boromir down, finally killing him, Aragorn shows up and battles this Uruk-hai, and in the end kills him, cleaves his fucking head off. And we have this moment, this tender moment between Boromir and Aragorn, where it's just like this pretty touching moment, where he sort of tells him, like, I would have followed you, and we get like it's been made pretty clear. They definitely take a time in the movie to show a little bit of this tension between Boromir and Aragorn.
Yeah.
Because again, like, Aragorn's place is to really take over where Boromir
and his father.
Yeah, and also, like, a thing between them also is that Boromir has been here defending Gondor for many years, but Aragorn is the heir by blood, and he would just show up and take the king. Like, it's almost like you just get to show up, but I've been here. I've been fighting for this country for a long time. But he tells him in his last moments that he would have followed him, like that he and he passes away.
Yeah.
And we see that Frodo made it back to the camp, and he starts to take one of the boats, and Sam, sees him there, and he says, Frodo, like, where are you going? Like, I'm coming with you. And Frodo says, no, I'm going by myself. And Sam is so committed to the point where he literally starts wading out into the water.
Even though he can't swim.
Yeah. And again, we have another like touching moment where Sam is so committed to stay with Frodo that he's literally like about to drown. Like, would have literally followed him out there and drowned rather than leave him.
Yeah.
And Frodo, at the last second, pulls him out of the water, and they have like a touching moment, like an embrace and stuff, and they continue on. And that essentially is how. Well, and then we have Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli
come together and decide that Legolas and Gimli learn that they're no longer helping Frodo along his way, but rather than completely disband, they agree that the best course of action is to save the hobbits.
Yeah, they can't leave Merry and Pippin, to be tortured or killed, so they are going to go after them, and that is essentially how the Fellowship ends right there. So
yeah, and in more than one way. Technically, the Fellowship of the Ring is not disbanded, but it's not as it started. We have Frodo and Sam off on one, Merry and Pippin kidnapped by orcs, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli forming the world's most iconic D&D trio, and Boromir sadly gone.
Gandalf also gone.
And for now.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Spoilers, Ryan. Jeez. But yeah, so I know we kind of just like railed through a lot of stuff right there. And at this point we're at the end of the movie, so we're basically just moving into our talking points. But let's maybe go back to the most recent portions that I was just talking about there. Anything to stand out that you'd want to comment on?
So I knew Boromir was gonna die, and I knew that he was a little. I knew that he was more susceptible to the power of the ring than any other member of the Fellowship. So a lot of that stuff kind of played out how I expected it to. Really, in general, this movie, there's like stuff that I didn't know happened, but in general, things played out as I thought they would. The interactions between Boromir and Aragorn, I had a feeling that they'd have this sort of like tension, but would end with like a camaraderie. Yeah, I knew Merry and Pippin were just going to be sort of like goofy. But I don't think I knew that Merry and Pippin got kidnapped, which is interesting because I've seen a little bit. I had seen a little bit of the Two Towers before, and so I knew that they got separated, but I don't think that I knew that they got kidnapped at the end of this movie. I knew that at the end of this movie, Sam and Frodo would get off on the boat together. I actually watched that happen in theaters. Like I had left the theater to watch a different movie, but by the time that movie ended, Lord of the Rings was like at this point in the movie where Sam and Frodo go off, and then Legolas, Aragorn, and Gimli decide to go after the hobbits. But yeah, so this movie in a lot of ways played out how I expected it to, but just had a lot more depth to everything. And I think looking back at this movie, having also watched the other two movies, I think I would have had different things to say about this movie had I not watched the other two. But having watched the other two, I think this movie is really good at setting things up. And one thing I'll note is there are like sort of in my estimation like notable important characters in the Lord of the Rings that really mostly only appear in this movie, and if they appear in other movies, it's very lightly. Like Boromir, he's only alive in this movie, but his presence is felt somewhat in the Two Towers, but a lot more than in the Two Towers than it was. More in Return of the King than in the Two Towers. You get the presence of Boromir because of the impact he had on other people. Arwen, you get her, like she's properly in the story in this movie, and in the other movies it's more like flashbacks and just seeing what's happening, but it's not as she's not like present, she's just elsewhere. But having her with Aragorn sets her up to matter, and that comes more into play in, I would say, in particular in the Two Towers. But yeah, I've kind of lost my track. So do you have any other?
Well, let me just throw out some questions to you. What would you say is your like favorite moment in this movie, like scene, even?
In Fellowship, my favorite scene, I I in my mind, the thing that sticks out is Galadriel with Frodo. It just I don't know. It's just like this sort of haunting thing, like her basically showing the corruptive powers that the ring potentially has on even her, who is like shown to be like pretty much like an angel, is what she looks like. So that's a scene that sticks out to me. Um, I like a lot of like the sort of humorous like walking around stuff, like when they are just sort of saying funny stuff, like the what about second breakfast, like
Mm-hmm.
it's the little things. It's like all the little quips more than any particular scene, at least in this movie. This movie, of the three, I think is the most just like a whole rather than any specific part. Like I would say that the Two Towers in particular is the has a lot more of standout scenes and parts of the movie. Whereas this movie, I sort of feel the same way about the movie the whole way through, except some of the walking in the middle of them basically before Gandalf dies, but after they've left Rivendell, that's sort of a slow part of the movie, but everything else I generally like.
So all the going through the mines of Moria, slow.
I like the action.
I know I'm not, like
Entering the mines, it gets better, but like before they go into the mines, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that makes that. I understand that. One thing that I think is interesting about the movies is that Two Towers has always actually been my favorite movie, right?
I think it's yeah, I agree with that. We'll get into that.
But Fellowship is the thing is Fellowship has a real right and proper beginning, right? A real actual start to a movie, and it has almost something where things kind of conclude in a way.
That's what I recalled watching as a kid, seeing them like no conclusion and like no like finality in this movie. It's a good setup, but yeah,
but it is being the first movie. It's got a good setup, but it doesn't quite come. I mean, they kind of tie some things up, but it is just continuation,
and
right?
it ends on a downer too.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Boromir just died. Gandalf's dead. Sam and Frodo have to go do it alone. Merry and Pippin have been kidnapped by orcs.
Yeah. And then you have Return of the King, which has a very good ending, right? It's actually an amazing movie. Obviously starts like, well overall. But then you have the Two Towers that just sits in the middle and is a middle movie. Like starts as a continuation and ends as a continuation.
So we'll be able to get more into that.
Yeah.
I definitely have opinions about the arcs of the movie as a trio, but Fellowship as a standalone film, it definitely made me like, I ended the Fellowship, like I went into watching the Fellowship and I was like, this is going to be 4 hours, and I finished the Fellowship and I was like, all right, I mean 8 hours left still, but I kind of want to watch it. I feel much more motivated to watch it now because the Fellowship does a good job of like investing you in these characters. I I'm going to talk about this more with the other two movies, but I went into this movie with probably the character that, having not seen the movies, the character that I always liked the most was Frodo, because it's the sort of, he's the main character, the sort of face of the movies in a way. And I always thought of Aragorn as being like the sort of generic man, fighter, ranger guy. But in watching the movie, finally, Aragorn is like he like he has this like genuineness to him. This like there's depth to him as a man that like even when he's Strider the Ranger, there's this quality to him that I sort of instantly like was like, you know what? Yeah, this dude, I want to see more of him. And even by just the end of this movie, I'm like, I can see how he'll become king. But he does more to earn that going forward. But yeah, Aragorn impressed me, was way more interesting than I thought he would be. And Merry and Pippin, funny characters. Sam Wise Gamgee, I think, gets a lot of credit as a good character in these movies as he deserves, but not so much in this movie. He's not really that important, like at all, other than being Frodo's friend.
Yeah, it's not until he becomes like his own protagonist, essentially. Like in this movie, he is more or less a side character, and there's a few like Aragorn's kind of a main character, Frodo's sort of a main character, and Gandalf are kind of main characters, and that sort of persists to a degree. But Sam, it becomes Sam and Frodo.
I haven't even talked about Gandalf really. Gandalf is he really just does talk in riddles and stuff in a way, but the thing about Gandalf that I think works best about him is, and it's something with how the film shot, so much of Gandalf is shot in the close-ups on his face, and you need a quality actor to be given good close-up acting like all throughout this movie, and you get that with Sir Ian McKellen, and it's just anytime Gandalf is there, you're just kind of like, you just can't help but love Gandalf.
I know, and you know, Ian McKellen, man, it like that deep voice and the way he says things, and like will draw out certain sentences, and yeah, it's just the most perfect, iconic, like favorite. It's like my favorite character in anything ever.
And conversely, Christopher Lee as Saruman is just so like he has that voice, maybe even more like deep and like gravitas having than Gandalf, but in such a dark, sinister way. Like my perception of Saruman is like, I know that he's bad, and I know that he's a bad wizard who, at least at this point, is more powerful than Gandalf, but he really just has this like he's a scary dude. And like when he like starts conjuring up the weather on the mountain to basically impede their way, like it really just like paints this picture of this scary guy, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I mean, like the idea that he has the power to bring down like a storm from that far away, it really does illustrate his power a lot more. I mean, him and Gandalf fight a little bit, but it's like, what else?
It's really one-sided at this point.
Yeah. Interesting thing though, in the books, it is not Saruman that causes a storm. The mountain causes the storm. The mountain does not like people traveling on it, and it is angry and wants to beat them.
Fair.
Yeah. Another interesting thing I believe I read somewhere is that Christopher Lee actually met J.R.R. Tolkien, and when they met, Tolkien said that if there were to be a movie, or I mean, this could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I read this somewhere, is that if there was to be a movie, he would want Christopher Lee to play Gandalf.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. But I think, yeah, that is a weird thing, because you could argue that Christopher Lee makes sense as Saruman because he had a film history of being a villain, of being Dracula, but like in a way, like the same year that Ian McKellen was playing good guy Gandalf, he was also Magneto. So
yeah, I don't know. But hey, I can't ever unsee Ian McKellen being Gandalf. He's just
Yeah,
Gandalf
yeah,
forever now. So
yeah, yeah.
iconic.
Truly, honestly.
So would you say you're? I mean, would you say you could pick a favorite character or?
After watching The Fellowship, I think my favorite character was probably still Frodo.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see if that changes.
Yeah. Um. So an interesting thing I like to bring up is that this movie. I mean, like, what do you think of Boromir as a character?
I think he represents in the way that Aragorn is like an elevated man, quite literally. It's articulated, I think, in the Two Towers, maybe Return of the King, that he is more than a normal man. Boromir is a regular man put into the Fellowship, and he is the representation of how the ring is bound to easily corrupt men. And I think that's sort of the role he plays in this movie, to show the immediate powers that the ring, the immediate evils of the ring, to corrupt Boromir, to take malicious actions.
See, one thing I think that the movies do a little bit of discredit is that Boromir in the books is really made out to be an equally noble man. And I think in the movies they sort of portray him a little more like just like they don't shed him in the best light.
I'll say that in the Fellowship, you get some flashback of him in Two Towers to paint his character a little more accurately to what the book is, because the next two movies treat Boromir like he was this sort of great paragon of men that he does not come off as in this movie. But in this movie, he's portrayed as his father's son, which we don't get the father until a little bit in the next movie, a lot of it in the last movie. But he does come off as not the best guy, to be honest. And yeah, and maybe it's the Sean Bean qualities of him giving a sort of villainous air to the character, but we know that he could have played it more honorable. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a directing choice, maybe, to paint him out to make. I don't know. It's a decision.
I'll say that. I mean, okay. Here's the thing: is it serves the story really well. Is that they make him like a sort of like this, where you give a couple moments where he seems redeemable. He doesn't seem like he's evil necessarily.
Yeah,
but he seems
corruptible.
Corruptible and harsher. And I think that serves the movie really well. But it's, again, this is really just a commentary of the book to the movie, right? Serves the movie well. In the end, we get his remorse. We have moments like when he's fighting with the hobbits, like clearly he's being a nice guy and he's like, palling around with them. And we see that he has there. I mean, he defends Merry and Pippin. So we know through his actions and things that he is a good man. But
I think you're right. I think if he was portrayed as just as good a guy as Aragorn from the beginning, and he was corrupted, it would get that the message of the ring's potential for corruption across better, and it would make his death feel more.
Yeah. In some ways you're like, oh, well, the kind of baddish dude in the party, like, he died. I think that in some ways it takes a little away from his character, from who he's supposed to be in the books. I mean, and
they make him feel expendable.
So you say that in the Two Towers and the Return of the King, we get some flashbacks, and right, that paint him a little more.
Two Towers has the flashbacks. Return of the King less so.
Yeah, so I know for a fact those flashbacks are extended cuts, so those are not in theatrical. So
gotcha.
Original viewers never got any indication that Boromir was like a better-ish guy,
other than the words of his brother and father, who are biased to paint him as better.
Right. And of course, his father saying like, my son was a great man and all this doesn't
means nothing coming from that guy.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, I mean, but I asked that just because, I mean, you like haven't seen you didn't read the book, so you don't necessarily have that reference, but I wanted to see if that's something that seems true to you. If knowing that in the books, he's made out to be a bit more noble, and he certainly does have moments, but
it makes his character, knowing that that's who he's supposed to be, it makes him make more sense within the context of Faramir and his father.
Yeah. What I think they do though is I think they're trying to, in the movie, show something that's not easily perceptible with that. Like in the book, they make it somewhat known that he's under great pressure though, right? That like the fate of Gondor is resting in his hands, and that he's, like, hey, this weapon that can save your people is here. And so you get that in the books, but like I think there is also they do get a flashback in one of the flashbacks in the Two Towers has Denethor saying like, go there and like bring back this weapon or something, like whatever it is, like you need to bring it back and come save us. Like he puts a lot of pressure on him, so that you get that because of the Two Towers. But the
Two Tower, because I think at first it was going to be Faramir that goes, but Boromir goes instead.
No, it's his father was like, send Boromir, like, because he's like, we need this to be done, and he doesn't trust Faramir to get it done.
But there was the implication that Faramir could have gone, but he made Boromir go instead, which sort of adds a tragedy in that light.
Yeah. But yeah, just something I always found interesting, that with the books in mind makes me, I understand almost why they did it with the movies, but I sometimes don't necessarily like it because I think everybody assumes that Boromir was not that great of a guy, but he should have gotten a little more credit.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, other than that, I don't know that. Yeah, I think we've gone through a lot of the most interesting things I can think about. I mean, is there anything else you might want to speak on
for this movie? I think I'm going to be able to talk more about the other two movies. This one very much does suffer from it being a sort of setup. Not to say that this is a not good movie. It is a good movie, but having seen the other two movies, it is the weakest of the three.
Yeah, which to say though, there's some things in here that are almost more that are more memorable in some ways, because
I think this is the most quotable movie. Yeah. This has the most quotable lines.
Yeah, but it's got the most quotable lines, but it's certainly got a lot of like singular moments that are like just kind of a big deal, right? At least in my feeling, right? I was like,
what's your favorite scene from this movie? I mean, you said it was probably the battle in the mines, right?
I say that's one of the coolest battles just because of how it gets set up. But I mean, favorite scene. It's difficult to say. I mean, I love Gandalf, you shall not pass, right? Just a huge the Balrog facing down.
You know what? That's actually a good answer.
Yeah. It's just like a moment where he's facing down this huge creature, and then bam, and then you just have like him falling, and it's such a, like, again, for you, because you didn't see it fresh, or you knew Gandalf comes back.
I saw it out of context as a kid.
Yeah, but it's a character you've been following since literally the beginning of the movie, and you think like, well, clearly he's got to be around, right? Like, and as a kid, at least,
I remember being told that Gandalf died, and I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, as a kid, I mean, it's hard to watch movies as a kid, and like when somebody dies, you're like, whoa, like I would say even back in the the early 2000s or whenever the first movie came out, it was a lot more rare to see some kind of main protagonist die. I think nowadays, there's movies that are a little more bold, and they take out main characters and kill people, which is more interesting in some ways. But yeah, back then it was like, what? Like, Gandalf's dead? He's like the most powerful guy here. Like, he's like the wizard. Oh my god, I can't believe he's dead.
Yeah.
So that one sticks out for me. I mean, but this even just to say, it's almost hard to say which one's my favorite, right? Facing down the Balrog, battle in Moria, the council at the Council of the Ring, where they all come together.
Yeah.
you have that battle with the moment with Boromir there at the end, the moment with Frodo there at the end, right in the beginning, the speech with Bilbo, that the moment when Bilbo gives the ring to Gandalf, and they have that there, Aragorn facing them on Weathertop, her killing the ring race on the river. There's just so many, when the ring falls on the Frodo's finger, there's so many like moments that are like just like bam, like this is a big deal.
I think Weathertop is probably the most impact. Like I didn't bring it up earlier as my most impactful scene, but it has to be my most impactful scene because it stuck with me. And
but maybe not your favorite, but most impactful, something that stuck with you. And I wouldn't even say necessarily the battling on whether, but the moment that when he stabbed. There are just so many scenes, I think, in this movie that are more singularly iconic. Like things, if you took them out, you're like, these are all big deals, and anybody that watched Lord of the Rings knows they're a big deal. You go look at, now, again, love The Two Towers. It's probably my favorite movie. And Return of the King, most awarded movie ever, so clearly is an excellent, movie-wise. But as far as Lord of the Rings goes, I would say that they have less moments, right? If you just had to count them all up, and someone might argue with me and say like, no, well, what about this when this happens? This happens.
When someone says Lord of the Rings, my mind pictures the Fellowship. My mind pictures the them at the Shire. My mind pictures the meeting at Rivendell.
Yeah, see, and I think so too.
You shall not pass. It goes to those things, and then if I start thinking about it, I start thinking of the Two Towers, and then if I really start thinking about it, I think about the Return of the King. But the most Lord of the Rings movie is The Fellowship.
Yeah, I think so. And I think you just would you agree that you experience a lot more in The Fellowship? That's where you're ranging, right? You start in this one place, and you're really kind of following this hero's journey a little bit, where you start in this this place of safety and comfort, and then you journey outwards into a place of danger and unknowns with your guides and everything.
That is one way to put it. Another way that I want to sort of articulate it is the journey within the Two Towers and the journey within the Return of the King has a sort of upward arc of, at the end of the movies, like especially at the end of the Return of the King, but to a certain extent by the end of the Two Towers, you feel like something's been accomplished. You feel like things are looking up. The Fellowship of the Ring is the only movie that sort of ends on a sort of downward pessimistic note, but still fills you with optimism. And that is something quite unique about it. And you're right. Like this movie has the most like jumping or going back and forth between, it's like, whereas the Two Towers has different stuff going on throughout it, it all feels like within the same movie. And the Return of the King, everything sort of feels like within the same movie. And then you get the ending, which maybe is the least similar to the rest of the movie before it. But I think the ending works. We'll get to that. The Fellowship has like multiple movies in it.
Yeah, it certainly has. It has like you're watching like multiple different. You're moving through these different unique scenes almost. It feels like you're really like. I mean, you're going from these different places. You're really going on a journey. You start in the Shire, and then you're moving to the Bree or this surrounding area there, and then you're in Rivendell, and then you're going to Moria, and then in Moria, and then you're moving from Moria to Lothlorien, and then you're moving from Lothlorien to this wherever that is, like that next place.
If you think about these movies as just experiencing the world for the first time through the lenses of these hobbits in a way, this is the most stark change from where they began. Like the other movies, stuff happens to them that changes them in stark ways, but it all begins here.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said about that.
Yep.
This is a great movie.
I'm so glad you feel that way.
Yeah.
I would agree as well. It's I would say it's interesting that you have not only a fresh perspective, right? But you're also, because you got to watch it as an adult, maybe you were able to apply more like watching it for a movie and apply more adult, understanding to it. Whereas as a kid, I almost feel like whenever I watch it still, I still can't even like have a very critical view of it because I'm just watching this nostalgic thing again.
This is what I told someone when I mentioned that I watched this movie, and they were like, "Oh, how is it?" And my response to them was, this movie is so much more emotional. These movies in general are so much more emotionally mature than they have really any right being. There are like nuanced emotions in these characters. Like, this is like such real depth that I don't understand how people watch this as a kid and get. I get the action, enjoying the action, and the story is good, but like there's like layers to these movies that I think I would not have really had any level of appreciation for at any other earlier part of my life, which is why I say that, brother, I did not watch these movies late. I watched them precisely when I meant to.
I love that. Yeah. And I think that's so well said. I almost just want to end it right there, but I have to say, I think that's an excellent point. And one thing I will note is that as a child, you're right. There is so much nuance that you can understand, in a meta cognitive way where you can see and feel all these different things because now we understand ourselves and our own emotions better. But as a kid, it still comes across. That's how good this movie is that when I'm watching this movie as a kid, I remember feeling, the fear, the excitement, the same, this movie brings you up and down through it. And as a kid, I still got it. I still got all of it.
I felt the fear as a kid. And the other things, I to be honest, when I walked into that movie, it wasn't a movie that I wanted to see to begin with. So I didn't go into it with an open mind as a kid. Mm-hmm. So that sort of, it wasn't going to work out well to begin with. So I can see the movie being so good that even a child could have an intuitive response to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think for me, I'm happy to have watched it now.
Yeah. And that's a damn good movie.
Yeah, it is.
Oh yeah. Well, honestly, I don't know that there's too much more we can say on this movie, unless you got something else.
I think we should save it for what's coming up next.
Yeah. So
we got 2 more of these coming, folks.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to it.
I am as well.
Well, until then, this has been Robert.
And Ryan.
Have a good one, folks.
Fly, you fools.